I come from the perspective of like, okay, let's implement Jira, let's make work management better. And in those scenarios, a lot of times Agile isn't, at least in its purest form, the best way to implement and do work.
What's the worst part of any project?
It depends on the
What's the
project, I
worst
guess.
change? No, it's changing people.
That's true, actually. Yeah.
User change management is always the hardest. And I think when you change a UI, it's actually changing people, right? So it's a user change. I think not so much in the community, but in the partnerships. Like I'm seeing lots of changes, and it's been hard. It's been very hard
For the partners.
And for the partners, and being a partner, it's like, but at the same time, like that's part of the growth again, right? Like when you sit back and look at the bigger picture, it's part of the growth and what they have to do.
Like obviously there's a lot of innovation with Atlassian and Jira, especially in the early days as a bug tracker. And now it's like such a behemoth. And I think there's still innovation that can happen, but we can prevent that from happening by telling Atlassian how to run their company or like what to do with the UI. That's just my 2 cents. Well, thanks, Aaron, for being here. The first question I want to ask is actually one that me and Alex talked about in our school community a couple of days ago, which was to use story points or to not use story points. So I'm curious if you have a take on this, and then I'll kind of explain the conclusion we came to.
Okay. So I'm kind of pro Kanban in a way. I'm more about like things constantly moving rather than any other kind of methodology, because I believe story points are very arbitrary, right? And so there's this arbitrariness in how we estimate. And what happens is everyone's estimates are a little different based on experience and, based on those things. So I have kind of moved away from story points. I much rather be able to use time, but like time in a way of like not estimating against people, but like how well did we do on estimating, I guess you could say, but try to bring that out as much as possible. So if we can just keep things moving, right? And I finish something, I can bring something else in. That flow kind of works better as to like, how do we keep things moving rather than stop and go based on like plans? Because as soon as you make a plan, right, it's usually gone. So you have your sprint planning, you throw all this stuff in there, you're like, that looks great. And then like tomorrow, you're like scrambling because all these other things change. So even sprint and sprint planning sometimes seem to backfire, right? Based on what's going on. I'm kind of more or less pushing towards the pro Kanban approach and like real metrics, and taking all of those real metrics and using those rather
is not a real metric.
Well, it is, but it's arbitrary. So it doesn't give you as much real-time feedback as, say, like cycle time, right? Or as like other metrics that show what actually really did happen, right? So I look at like, have you used flow metrics before?
I have not.
Okay. I want to say, what's the name of the creators there? 55 Degrees. So if you want to look up 55 Degrees and then flow metrics, they're really great tool. And I actually learned it from a colleague of mine from the last partner I worked at. And she was teaching me about like pro Kanban. Because before that, I was like total Scrum, right? And then Kanban as like a fit for non-development teams. But as she started to teach me about flow metrics and pro Kanban and kind of like keeping the flow of work going, right? I started to try to change how I felt about it because I applied those methods to myself in my own work. And it kind of pulled me out of the Scrum methodology in a sense and said, well, is there a better way to do it that keeps me moving and keeps things pulled in? So as I finish something, can I pull something else in that would fit that gap of what I need to fill? So that's kind of where my methodology has been going for myself. I don't know that I can preach it to the world, but that's what starts to fit for me. And I think there's other teams that could benefit from that based on how they work.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I'm not anti-story point, but I think there are better alternatives to track when something's going to get done and the level of effort. Time is kind of one of those things, even if it's even if you can't get super accurate, which is kind of the reason story points are used, like we don't know necessarily how much time something's going to take, it's still a good baseline metric to shoot for, right? You got a due date of end of the week, or like it's going to take you X amount of time. You have the rest of the week to wrap that up. If you're going overtime, you're more motivated to like wrap that thing up quicker versus like a story point where it's just, okay, this is going to be complicated. It's probably going to take a while. It just seems a little like up in the air in terms of when something can get done, even if you are using sprints. So yeah, I'm pretty pro like, can we get a deadline? Can we get a general time frame? That way we, generally speaking, know when this feature, bug, whatever could get resolved or implemented. But yeah, I get the appeal for story points. I get the reason they're used. What are your thoughts on t-shirt sizes? I feel like I find those a little bit more relevant than like a story point personally, but to each their own.
T-shirt sizing. I think I'd rather use just time estimates in general. And I guess you could use t-shirt sizing in that ideology of using time metric,
Yeah.
like what's the original like estimate of time? I say this is going to be 8 hours. I completed in 7, right? Or maybe I completed in 10 and I'm over a little bit.
Mhm.
I'll give you an example. Um, as as we learn to use time and track time, we get better at estimating time of how long something takes. But when we don't do something, like I never did that one thing before. So you estimate it and you're like, oh man, I have no clue because I've never did that before. So that estimate's going to be, again, arbitrary, where you've done something over and over and you have a great idea of how it, works. If you're giving yourself time for interruptions, then you should be able to complete it in that time frame, right?
Hmm.
So I think I would rather use time even over, I guess you could kind of mix those two of time with t-shirt sizing, right? Like it's a large, it's a small, it's a medium. But I would say just saying it's going to take me X amount of time probably fits better.
Mhm.
I mean, you could do both, but I think I would rather just go with time.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, actually, that the more you estimate something, the more likely you'll be accurate about that estimate moving forward versus like you never give estimates. It's just a little bit more arbitrary. With story points, then it's harder to say, like, you have experience with X amount of time. Um, and you've already done that several times with like similar tasks or maybe new tasks. You're going to get better and better at estimating that time the more you do it. I think that's actually a really great point. But yeah, I think what we landed on with Alex was that teams use Scrum and story points because it's familiar. So you're working at a dev team, right? You go to a new company, they're probably using Scrum, sprints, and story point. Like very likely they're using that. And you move to another company, most likely they're using that too. So it's like a baseline framework that everybody adopts and makes it easy to jump in and just kind of get moving. I think that's sort of where we landed, where it's like familiar, easy, and it works. Like clearly it's worked, but it may not be the best method. It's just the most familiar that's like easy to adopt for a team. That's sort of where we ended up landing on that.
I think that's fair. And I think as time rolls on, like we'll get new frameworks and Agile. You keep seeing things in the news about Agile being dead. And
Mhm.
I don't know if that's true, but I think it's definitely going through a transformation. I'm seeing a lot of teams. So I came from a prior life, I came from 3D printing. And 3D printing is a really unique industry because a lot of 3D printing have actually 3 different portions of it, right? So it's broken down into development, software development, hardware development, and manufacturing because it has to do all 3. Most of them have to do all 3. Like they're making filaments, they're building the hardware to containerize the software and actually execute the job. So not all of those teams can work the same. Not all of them can fit the mold of like Scrum. Not all of them can fit the mold of Kanban. Hardware teams definitely are more waterfallish because they have to think about the long term because you can't
Right.
just change hardware overnight, right? So fitting them into a software development lifecycle is actually detrimental to them because they can't change something for a year, right? Or 2 years because their life cycles are a lot longer. So they need to look at the long picture where in Agile, we're looking at like, what's the short-term picture, right? What's the iterative picture of today? Because if I make a plan for the 3 months, that 3 month plan is broke as soon as we walk out of that meeting. So we need to look about the now. So it depends on the type of team you're working in. logistics, I work with a lot of logistics teams, and man, things change there daily, minutely, and
Mm,
you look at like where Kanban ideologies came from is really in the manufacturing logistics area, right? How do we move things around? Where do they
right.
go and how fast can they go? And it's about being able to make something go from we're going to start this thing and then we're going to finish it. And I think if we just keep that in mind and apply that to different teams in different ways, it's better because
Hmm.
we can't all fit the same mold. Even some software development teams can't fit in the software mold because of what type of software they're developing or their life cycle in
Hmm.
general.
So true. Yeah, especially when you maybe have to reverse engineer like a very specific use case product, you probably need to have a certain set of features and things to deploy when the product is ready, which means you may have to go waterfall versus agile. But yeah,
Mhm.
it's just interesting to think about, right? Because like so many teams use these frameworks for work, but they really haven't been around all that long. And it's kind of makes you curious, like with AI, with all this other stuff, like is there something better that we just don't use yet, or that's like not a mainstream adopted version of work, but ultimately can be better. And probably, I'm assuming as time changes, like these methodologies will change or be adopted in a different way, maybe be slightly different moving forward. But yeah, just kind of seeing like there is this standard, and the standard is used with every team, but as of right now, may be a good solution, but we don't know for how much longer. It's just kind of a interesting perspective to have it, especially from like coming from my perspective where I'm not a developer. I don't like sit and develop and write code 8 hours a day. I come from the perspective of like, okay, let's implement Jira, let's make work management better. And in those scenarios, a lot of times Agile isn't, at least in its purest form, the best way to implement and do work. And it's like, okay, but then what is like, what can we use? What's the alternative? And that's when you kind of have to get creative and maybe create your own system, create your own process, whatever it is that you're doing to implement and make sure that it works for your team in particular.
Yes. I've used like so many different methods doing Atlassian implementations and migrations. I mean, I've used service desk to do some of this work. I've used Kanban to do some of that work. We've done sprints to do that work. And you find out where things fit and where they don't. You just have to do what works best for you. I think the more flexible something is, the better, because then
Mhm.
you can be iterative. But yeah, I think you're right in what you and Alex were talking about is like it's always easy to go to what's known to, right? And
Mhm.
then, go from there. When I worked in the 3D printing industry, one of the cool things is we had this like Scrum bomb, they called, where it was like taking the methods of both and kind of mixing them together. And for some of the departments, it worked really well.
Mhm.
For others, it was like, what are you thinking? But like for some of the departments, it was like, it actually worked. So just
Interesting.
depends on the team.
Yeah, I talked to John Funk, and he used to work at Dave Ramsey. I don't know if you've heard this before, but their huge organization used one workflow for every team in the company. So
Mhm.
it's like there's no wrong way to do something. It's just how does it work, and does it work for your team? And if it makes work happen, cool, big thumbs up, you're good to go. And that's like such a like you would never think to do that. At least not today. I don't know if they still do that at Dave Ramsey, but if I go implement something in Jira, I would never think, yes, engineering is going to use the same workflow as the sales team or the HR team. That would be like kind of a wild thought. But to each team, they kind of operate and work differently. They have their own resources and their own way of work, and if it works for them, it works. But yeah, just a unique thing because I've heard a lot of different perspectives and things, and that was one of the more interesting ones for sure. Um, what are your thoughts on like Atlassian and their direction and what they're doing with Jira, their products, kind of going more enterprise, the changes they're making? What is your gut reaction to all that?
Well, I mean, they're growing and I don't know, like I've watched companies go public and, over time when they go public, they change. And that's part of the morphium of a company when they go through that process. No longer is it, the founders and the wholesome team vibe anymore because now we have to appeal to the people who are funding us, right? And are
Mhm.
helping us grow and helping us move. And we have to appeal to a board and those decisions. And so I think that once you go public, like be ready for kind of culture shock, because what your culture was before will not be going forward. And that also changes the product, right? Like in essence, it will change the product because it will need to morph into that new way of being. I kind of think of us as people, we go from adolescence, right? We like to play, we do all this cool stuff. And I kind of take that into business also. Like when you're in the startup phase, you're kind of still a child. You like to play and romp and go do things. And, you're more worried about going to get coffee during your little mini breaks and chit chat with your friends in like the playful area, right? And you can go play ping pong and do all these kind of things. And I've worked in the startup phase, and a lot of companies that are in startup, even once they go public, they try to keep that culture because it's fun and people want to be there. But you go through this growth phase and it changes, just like adolescence. We go from being a child to being an adult, and it happens,
Mm-hmm.
it kind of happens fast in a way, right? And same thing, once that happens, it's like, we have to appeal to this now. And I think that's the thing that we have to think about is Atlassian's going through that. And so they're going to have to appeal to the Microsofts of the world and the Googles of the world and the Teslas of the world, because they're in that realm now, right? Their user base is in that realm. Their infrastructure is in that realm. And so they have to be able to have those feature sets and be able to accompany many different use cases. So I think where they're going is not bad, but I think it's culture shock for the rest of us who have been part of the ecosystem for a long time and want them to be a certain way. So that's kind of how I would look at it. I do like what they're doing with Rovo and AI and trying to bring the future of work and the way they're doing their acquisitions to help do that. I think, it appeals to the board, but it also appeals to the enterprise. Like, this is what we're trying to appeal to. And they really want to, I think they really want to attack people at work, right? Like when I say attack, like be most useful for those people that need to get work done and have to do less with, because we're a lot of companies are lean, especially in the enterprise realm now, right? So we have to do more, but we have less. We have less resources. We have less people. How can we do more, and how can we get stuff done? So I think that's what they're trying to appeal to. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's a change.
Do you think it's an ultimate good for the company and the user base, kind of the direction they're heading? Or do you think that they're maybe doing too much to appease like shareholders and all that, and going into the world of AI as every other company is, and kind of following that trend rather than maybe building or doing things that the community or the users love?
I think they're trying to do both. And the reason I say is because the way they position Rovo, like they're trying to still make it fun. They're trying to still make it usable in this sense. I see that. And I see the people that are at Atlassian that have been there for a very long time that are at the forefront of that. Like I work with a lot of them. I've been working with a lot of them for a number of years. And I don't think they have changed. Like the people haven't changed and the ideologies haven't changed with the way they want to do things and they want to keep it fun. But the expression outwards of when we're deploying it, how it gets deployed, that's changing, right? I do think that like there's always lessons learned. There was some recent ones about the way some things were communicated and the channels they used. And it was like not really good. And the community people actually helped kind of fix that. It was like us in the community that raised our voice and said, hey guys, you guys got to pump the brakes here. And like, we need to rethink this. And if you go back some years, like partners and champions, as they're called now, like leaders, community leaders, have really built Atlassian up in the essence of like where it is today. And I just hope like wherever they do go, they remember those folks, because those folks, they would not be where they were today without those folks, right? And so we're seeing that change. I think not so much in the community, but in the partnerships, like I'm seeing lots of changes, and it's been hard. It's been very hard.
For the partners.
And for the partners, and being a partner, it's like, but at the same time, like that's part of the growth again, right? Like when you sit back and look at the bigger picture, it's part of the growth and what they have to do. So not very fun all the time, but I think we still have that good relationship with them. They still recognize that they need us and we need them. And I think as long as we keep that methodology, things will be fine. As far as like the outward with like the enterprise, like it's not something I think we can stop in the growth, like where they have to go. And I think they will have to appease the shareholders and the board people. Like that's just something they have to do now. Navan just went public not too long ago. And I'm like, yep, they're going to go through the same thing. Like Navan's an amazing tool. And we used it at one of the places I worked. And I was like, man, where was this all my life? Like, this is so good for travel and expensing and whatnot. And like every company should have it. And, now you see these ones in IPO and they're going to go public and you're like, oh yeah, things are going to change for them. And it's like, let's see how the growth happens, right? Like, let's see how that change happens. And I think there's things they could do to do better, and they just have to learn those lessons along the way of how they need to course correct. What's your thoughts there?
I think I'll relate it back to one specific change that Atlassian made, which was the status button. And there was an uproar, right? Like, oh, why did this happen? Why is this move to a new location? And honestly, I think the change was good, ultimately.
I did too.
And the interesting part is that they reverted it. So clearly, a lot of the people that have used Jira for a very long time, probably a considerable amount of them were like the actual creators, the community, all that. They created enough noise to get that reverted. And I ask myself, was that a good thing or not? Because a lot of times, like, we as users don't really know what we want, right? If you asked back in the day, like, the consumer what they wanted, they say a faster horse and a better buggy, not a new car. You asked what you wanted in a new phone, maybe it's quicker dialing, smaller, whatever. It wouldn't be an iPhone. So consumers don't necessarily know what they want. And that's sort of the decision of the company to carve the path and innovate in the best way. I mean, I think there's clear innovators that help do this, but to help innovate the path forward. And if the company listens too much to the user base, I think they kind of trip themselves in being able to do that. Like, obviously, there's a lot of innovation with Atlassian and Jira, especially in the early days as a bug tracker. And now it's like such a behemoth. And I think there's still innovation that can happen, but we can prevent that from happening by telling Atlassian how to run their company or like what to do with the UI. That's just my 2 cents. I think a lot of the UI changes they made have been pretty good. There's some problems for sure, but generally speaking, it looks way better, feels way more modern. If I'm coming in from like an outside user, I'm going to be way more comfortable with the new UI than the old one. So I think a lot of the stuff they're doing is good, but I think they should listen in some cases less to the community and to the people and just say like, hey, this is the better option. If it's tried and tested internally, let's just move forward with it. Give it like a year, and if it's really that bad, then remove it, or like give people an option to switch it back, in their own Jira environments.
Yeah, I was hoping they would have put a toggle in the personal settings so that I could put the status back there, because I actually liked it, because it reminded me of data center and server, right? The old days where it was there. So to me, it was like, oh, we are kind of moving back in time, which was like kind of cool. And I seen the uplift and the uproar from the community, and I was like, hey, that's pretty cool that they could do that. Like, to me, I felt empowered as a user and as a community champion, and as, working on my creator content. I was like, man, that's pretty powerful that we had that kind of voice. Because if you did that with Microsoft, it would have never worked. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's two-way. Like, it's really cool that it was that powerful. But at the same time, like you said, are we stopping innovation? Are the users stopping the innovation, or are the community base stopping? So you have to ask that both ways, I think. Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle there, because I thought it was cool, but then I also was like, I kind of liked it there. So I hope they give us an option in the future.
Of people that were like super upset, because like for me, I was super used to the old UI, like, super muscle memories, change the status, whatever. Yep. But ultimately, I remember coming into Jira when I first started, and I was like, this is kind of weird placement. Now I'm used to it and I'm fine with it. And I could totally see from the perspective of new users, them coming in and looking at the status button, being like, it's a little bit of a weird placement, and being okay with it. But ultimately, the better version of the UI would probably be where it was when they changed it.
I know when they did the big UI change, I thought, hey, are they going to like keep the toggle there to go back to the old? Because I had muscle memory from almost like, 5 some years for that specific way of, like, since 2018, right, is when they switched that sidebar view that they used to have to the new sidebar view. And I was like, oh man, I got really used to that. And then, they've added lots of things since with automations and different things and different buttons. And whenever a UI changes, like, oh my God, now I got to relearn this,
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. One of the recent ones is the workflow builder now. And
mhm,
I hear a lot of complaints about it. It is objectively better. It is so much better than before. Like you had your conditions, your validators, your post functions. Like if I'm coming into Jira, and I remember coming into Jira and I was like, what does this even mean? Versus
mhm,
right now it just says like validate a field, perform an action, add a condition or add some other
mhm.
terminology for it. But like if I'm coming in and the UI is way better, if I'm coming in to do something in Jira, my goodness, it's so much easier than it used to be. Like, I don't have to learn all this terminology. I don't have to like use this clunky 2010 workflow builder. It like feels way more modern and better now. But there's still people who are like used to it who are going to say it's not great because it's not what they expect it to be.
Or it's new and they have to relearn. The muscle
Yeah,
memory is changing. I think that's the biggest part, right? The muscle memory. So
for sure.
there was this little glitch where you could make a change in the workflow, right? And it would like pull it out to a new window. You could make the change to the
Mm,
validator, the custom. You close that window. When you go back to the other window, you would have to refresh it, right?
right.
For it to take form. And instead of going forward to the next one and using that, I would always close it and refresh the window with Command R real quick. And then we don't have to do that anymore. And it's like, oh, that's really nice. We don't have to do that because that's nice. But the muscle memory says something else, right? Like
Yeah.
I thought I need to do that. So I think that's the hardest part is like when you talk about like doing like a big project, right? What's the worst part of the project? What's the worst part of any project?
It depends on the
What's the
project, I
worst
guess.
change? No, it's changing people.
That's true,
So
actually.
so so user change management is always the hardest. And I think when
Mm,
you change a UI, it's actually changing people, right? So it's a
mhm.
user change. And so what's the hardest to do is conform users to any change. And so if their muscle memory says go here, now they got to relearn this new thing. That's the struggle of the user change management. And so in software, there is a methodology about changing UI and changing the user experience and how that can push people away from your product.
Mhm.
But there's an understanding in software development that we always need to like look for the better use case, right?
Right.
Of how we change that. And if you talk to UX UI teams, they usually very super cautious about where things lay out and how they lay out because it has to fit the user experience. And so I think that that's where the hardest part comes in is that. And for me, I'm like, I have muscle memory, but I love learning new things. So when they change
Mhm.
something for me, it's like not a big deal, but I look at it from like people who been working in the same place and doing the same job for 10, 15 years. When that changes for them, that's hard. Or if a policy changes, right? That's hard for them. They're like, hey, this is not how it used to be. Why is it changing? So
Yeah.
it just
No,
comes
that's
back to
that's
that.
a great point where if you change too much, you lose the current user base. If you don't change enough, you lose the future user base. And it's a balance of how do you change just enough to appeal to both. And that's what Atlassian is trying to do. They have a huge customer base that they've had for years at this point. But then there's also like the new teams that are coming into Jira and like with the old UI, if I was coming into Jira, I'd be like, yeah, this feels a little dated, feels a little old. But with the new UI, I really like it. But that new UI pissed a lot of people off who loved the old UI and like we're muscle memory, power users of Jira. And it's hard to walk that fine line, especially when the product is so old, right? Jira's old and it's a very, very old tool that's been around the block. And it's like, how do you keep up with all this like new UI stuff, right? The new UX stuff, the tools that are competing with it. Like you can't just sit and be your own tool that's super legacy and old. I would look at that and be like, I don't want to use that tool. They're not putting any effort into their UI. Why would I ever use that? And I think that's where a
Right.
lot of people are and were with Jira. And the fact that they're adopting is like a huge signal that they want to go after the rest of the market as well.
I had some friends that were not happy about the new icons. And when I seen the new icons hit, I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. I
I
was like,
loved them
so
too. I
better.
thought they
I
were
love
awesome.
them. I thought they were like, they were just having such a hard time with it. And I don't think it was like necessarily them that had a hard time. It was their user base that was having a hard
Mm.
time with it. That's not an epic. That's not a story. That's not a bug, you know? And I'm like, but we have to change those things
Mhm.
because, like you said, there's new user base, times are changing. We have to have modern UIs to fit how we visualize things, and kind of like take that over to the PPM realm. Like a lot of people struggle with how they see data as in that project management space, right? And they
Yeah.
use specific tools because of how they visualize data. And one of the things that's really hard is taking PPM into from a sheet, right? From like Google Sheets or Excel, and moving them into a modern tool like Jira or any of
Mhm.
the other tools out there. And if they don't have that like sheet look, they like fall apart.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, but you can visualize it like 100 different ways here and not have, and still visualize it in that, that's still like line chart type deal. But that's just not hitting for them. It's funny how that works.
Yeah, there's whole plugins in Jira, JXL, to make Jira look like an Excel spreadsheet, which is very funny and interesting. And there's clearly a huge market behind it. Yeah, a lot of people are like very used to the way they work, and they do not want to break that.
Mhm.
But it also like there's like a whole nother side to it, right? Like let's say the tool never changed and the user base is super happy. The longer that goes on, the less users will use the product, and probably most likely eventually it'll just die. So you're kind of in this between a rock and a hard place. You either have to change to grow the product, or you don't change and you die. It's just one of
Yeah.
those two. You just got to adopt, and you have to adapt with the times. If you didn't use Google 20 years ago, you probably should have been, or the internet. Now, if you're not using AI, you probably should be. And it's going to get harder and harder to avoid these new things that are making such an impact on work, productivity, on everything that we do. And the longer you avoid it, I think the more of a disservice you end up doing, even though it can be very hard to break your muscle memory and like your core way of working.
That's the hardest part, I think, for most people.
Yeah,
So
no,
you
for
just,
sure. If you're like me, you've probably deleted a Jira work item by accident, and then you realize that there's no way to get it back. Happens to the best of us, and that's why I want to share one quick tip. Always have a backup. Trust me, I've seen too many teams learn this the hard way. Our partner, GitProtect.io, makes this simple. It's a reliable backup solution for Jira that protects your work so mistakes don't turn into disasters. Check them out at GitProtect.io. I'm curious, like, so with the status button in particular, there was a Chrome extension that moved it back. Did you know about that?
I didn't see that one. No, I didn't
Yeah,
see the
so
Chrome extension that
Chrome
moves
had
it back.
created a whole extension to move the button back to where it was. And it apparently was like a hugely popular extension, like extremely popular. And that was one of the catalysts that kind of drove Atlassian to push it back. So I'm wondering if there's like a version of that for the people that love the change reverses it now. I'd be curious to see if anybody's done that, but I highly doubt it because not enough people complain about the status button where it is now.
Yeah, I don't know, but I might make one because I liked it. So
I've actually had a lot of
it's fun.
ideas where I was like, man, I wish I could just do a Chrome extension and make all the little changes in Jira that I want and have it be like perfect for me. And one thing that I've actually done, do you use Arc browser?
Arc, I don't know.
It's the browser company that Atlassian
Oh,
just
Arc
acquired.
browser. No, yeah, I do use Arc. In fact, I like it better than any like Chromium
Mhm.
based one because I like that they switch the top headers to the side, and
Yeah.
the way that you can have multiple open and move back and forth and keep them open. It's kind of helpful. But I tell you what, if you've been used to Edge or Chrome for the amount of years you use it or whatever you're using for IDP backing it, like I
Mhm.
use Edge still because it's easy for me to get to the tools that I use every day,
That
but I
makes
would
sense.
rather use Arc. And the reason
Yeah.
I'd rather use Arc is because the way it's formulated and the way
Mhm.
that I can hide the drawer now, the drawer can hide out and come back in at where you map to. It kind of reminds me of just being in Jira, right?
Yeah.
The other reason that I haven't used it lately is I have the Chrome extension for Rovo in Edge because you can import your Chrome extensions into Edge. And I use that to navigate my work every day because I'm in
Oh.
Jira 24/7. So like having my work right there when I open up a browser makes sense for me. And they haven't added that ability to Arc yet. And
Mhm.
I have friends at Atlassian, they're like, we can't even use Arc because it's not approved. And they're like, we want to use Arc. And it's like, we own it. Why can't we use it? But they're going through that change. So
Yeah.
hopefully soon they'll have Arc or is it Dia?
Dia. Yeah.
Dia
I
or
haven't
Arc,
used that
whichever
one
one they're
much.
going to improve. So tried to get it, and then it was like in the closed or open beta, and then I got the email real late, and by the time I got it, I was like, I'm not even worrying about it right now. I'm getting comfortable with Arc, because then in Dia it goes back to like the old Chromium based top one, and I was starting to get used to the side. So
well, they
I
have a
just
side
kind of
option too, where you can
Oh,
toggle
they
it to the
do?
side. Mm-hmm.
Oh, I didn't see that. I have to go back. I can imagine that Arc and Dia will eventually be like the place of work and kind of Atlassian's forefront to be able to get in there and not have to worry about making a lot of moves to move around and get in there. And Rovo will be part of that experience. So at least from the stuff that I saw, like that they presented at Teams 25 Europe and Barcelona. And, they always give you a glimpse of what's coming, but you don't really get it for a while.
Yeah,
so.
that kind of like rings another bell for me. It's you have Microsoft who has Edge, you have Google who has Chrome, and now you have Atlassian who has Arc. So like feels like they're really, really going after that slice of the pie, right? The work management tools. I don't know if they'll get into the IDP stuff. Maybe they will with Guard, like email management and all that. But like you could see the parallels that they're starting to draw and starting to do with their acquisitions, which is very interesting to see if they're going to like really go after that market or maybe step into something else.
So a couple of years ago, they sent out a middle, was it, like asking questions about like, how would you like this? I think this was when Guard was still Access, but how would you like to like have Atlassian be your like SSO kind of thing? So I think they were trying to feel it out. Like, could this become something bigger? And I was like, hey, that'd be kind of cool because I live in Atlassian every day. So for me, it'd be cool. Right. But for the person that lives in Microsoft every day, they probably won't like that. Like, how do you interweave all these together?
They already did that with Loom. You could sign in with Atlassian with Loom. So they have the infrastructure. Maybe they'll kind of expand that out.
But like if you're using from another IDP, right? Like you're obviously going to use that SSO and SCIM to provision and go from whatever that is. And I think that was the best move with exploring like how they could take Access and build Guard and build the premium. And the way that they did that, I think was good. But I think there's a lot more potential there, definitely. I don't think they'll try to compete with the Microsofts and the Google in this sense. I think what they'll do is like what they do now, the system will work. We just want to bring everything from those into here. We have the smart links. We have these things that work. Why not use the tools you choose and bring them in here? And then let's look at Rovo to aggregate the data, right? Let's look at Teamwork Graph to be able to like populate the data the right way. And I think in essence, that would be better than trying to compete, right? Because now it doesn't matter what you use, like use Google, use Microsoft. I work for a Microsoft partner. So we use Microsoft tools. I don't like it. I like Google products. Like that's where I came from. And I've been administering them for a long time. But as long as that data flows into where I work every day, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't really matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. So as long as I can open up my document and say, here, this is the document and here's a link to it from Confluence and here, let's work on it together, then I'm okay. Like that's totally fine.
Yeah. Okay. Well, to wrap things up, one final question. I think I have a pretty good answer for this, but I'm curious what you think. What is the one industry or kind of field that Atlassian is the most ripe to break into that they haven't yet? In terms of like work management tools.
Well, I mean, like it works in ID, but what if they have their own ID, right? Like I kind of thought about that the other day.
What do you mean by ID?
So like the developer experience, right? Like most developers live in their like VS Code or Cursor or whatever. What if they had their own version of that already had like Confluence, Google, all of that preloaded, like no, like you could just sign in and go and all of that was there. Because here's the thing I think about. As we get into AI tools to explore like us who develop or us that vibe code or us that do both or us that recode or us that don't, as we learn to grow and bring on these new skills, the developer experience is going to change, right? It's already changing. And some people have a great head start because they're very great developers. And some people are learning to become developers by using AI to teach them and to explore how can we do that, And I think it's going to bridge the gap of like, what we will be in the future when it comes to work management, when it comes to like development. And that's what people are trying to build for, right? Is that new experience. So I kind of think I would hope they would go that way to see like how could they build that better. But I don't know. What about you? Like, where do you think? Because like they have a lot of different places they already fit. And
Yeah, your answer is better than mine. I'm going to steal that.
go for
My
it.
answer is more work management focused, and I would say probably a very prime area that has some competition in the very enterprise space, but not so much in kind of the mid market. There is some, but I would say it's a little bit lacking. Is the CRM space,
Oh
because
yeah,
we
yeah.
we had like the service management space, which they kind of obliterated at this point. Like they're the default if you're not enterprise, smaller company, like they're the best option. I think
Hmm.
CRM is one of the next ones. You have like the Salesforce, which is super enterprise, super feature rich. Then you have the HubSpot, which does work for mid market. It is very expensive though, which is kind of a bummer. So I think there's a lot of opportunity where because a lot of companies already use Atlassian and very likely, probably like 95 if not 99% of their customers use a CRM. If they came out with that kind of a product, they could probably take a lot of that market share.
Oh yeah, I thought about that before, but I think they are so heavily reliant on Salesforce. Like, if they went to compete, what would happen? Because
Mm.
obviously, like businesses have to have deals and businesses have to
Oh yeah,
coexist and use each other's services. And I'm like, oh, if they maybe they'll do that. Because when CSM came out, I was like, oh,
yeah.
here we go, Salesforce. Here we go, Zendesk. Like it's coming. And then I'm like, oh, I think what they're trying to differentiate when they did that was here's the customer focus, here's the internal customer focus.
Mhm.
We want to split those because for so many years they've been one place. And that's been hard for companies to work around and know how
Yeah.
to manage that. And so that was a way to like differentiate which teams are working with which customer base. So I think that's what that was about. I don't think that was
Well,
like a hit of like, we're going to
mhm.
compete with Salesforce.
Well, what's interesting is that both those CRM, the big CRM players, also have a customer support, like a CSM solution. So
Mhm.
Atlassian has that, but they don't have the space of the CRM. I mean, you can technically do it, but it's not great. I think they're doing it more with their the new platform that they're rolling out specifically for like customer management, not so much like internal teams. It seems like more of that is hitting in that area, but I wouldn't be surprised if like in the next 5 years they announce like a full blown alternative to the CRM products that they have built into their suite of services and all that.
It would be cool to see. It would be cool for them to do that, I think. I would definitely follow it because I am not very savvy with Salesforce and I've connected so many environments to Salesforce, but Salesforce is a hard one. It kind of reminds
Oh
me
yeah.
of the ServiceNow, right? Like it's a very legacy cloud tool. It has a lot of old ways of working built into it. It has a lot of things that make it hard. And you have to have like really great expertise to
Oh
actually
yeah.
like manage and build it. And so there's really great minds out there doing that. But in today's market, do you want a team of 12 to have to support it? Or would you rather have a team of two or three?
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Or
you
zero.
know, or zero. Yeah. Would you want it to self live? I think about where Atlassian was in 2016. And we are Atlassian partner on Monday. And I look at Monday and I'm like, Monday is really showing themselves as the Atlassian back in like 2015, 2016. They're like,
Mhm.
they have these products. They're trying to build their own system of work. They're
Yeah.
like starting to add some like great technology features, but they're not like super enterprise yet. Or nobody's like pushed it to be like this system of work. But I think
Mhm.
like there's always going to be a new player in the market, right? There's always going to be a new mind coming. And I think like if anybody's going to do that, I think Monday's really trying. I don't know if they will, but I
Mm.
think they're trying. And they already have a CRM,
Yeah.
So would Atlassian compete and say we're going to build our CRM now? And they kind of have it. I mean, you could make projects that are CRM based, right? And you
Yeah.
could run
It's
it
not
that way,
quite there, but yeah, you can technically do it.
but it doesn't run your like email campaigns and all of that stuff, right? They're still missing
Mhm.
some of the HubSpot and the Salesforce and some of these other CRMs like niche
Mhm.
features. So we'll
For
see.
sure.
I don't know. I would like to see it though.
We'll
Hopefully.
need to write our predictions down and then look back at them 5 years from now.
We
See
should
see
do
how many
that
of them
as
were
like a
accurate.
Yeah, like all the Atlassian professionals, like during teams this year, all come together and write down a prediction and
Ooh,
like
that's
put it
actually a
there. And
great idea.
we should do that. Yeah, we could have like a little booth for that, and then like someone can
That's
go and like put it into like a form,
It's a
something.
great idea. That we're doing something at team, and I will incorporate that for sure because that sounds awesome.
That would be cool.
All right.
Just
Well,
take
thanks,
my
Aaron.
ideas on fly because I don't have enough time to do them.
We'll do our best,
Yeah.
and we'll give you the props for it.
Nah, it's okay. Anyways, it was thanks for having me. It was a real pleasure to like chit chat with you and talk about the things we did. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's great having you on. Thanks, Aaron.
All right, have a good day.